Good evening and welcome to Novara Live. My name's Stephen Methven, and tonight I'm joined by the one and only Dalia Gebrial. Dalia, how are you?
Stephen, I'm pissed off, and we're going to find out why in our first story. But yeah, no, I'm not happy, but I am happy to be with you. So
I'm very happy to be with you, but otherwise a kind of ball of rage, to be honest. But we're going to get to that in a minute. Coming up tonight, your party appears to be in chaos over the membership launch. The revolution that shook Nepal. I speak to some of the Gen Z protesters who were in the middle of it, as well as a British tourist who happened to be there when it all happened and caught it on camera. And Jimmy Kimmel has been taken off air for his comments on Charlie Kirk's killings. So before we start, it is Thursday, which means tomorrow morning, everyone signed up to our most popular newsletter, The Cortado, will get the freshest take on the week's news straight to their inbox. Normally, it's Ash that takes the lead, but this week, our very own Harriet Williamson is stepping in. What better way to start your Friday, especially in light of all this drama today? And if you haven't signed up yet, don't worry, there's still time to. Just head over to novara.media/The Cortado tonight, sign up, and Harriet's piece will be waiting for you in your inbox tomorrow morning. All very slick. Remember your party, the New Left Party? Well, today it appeared to completely implode amid what looks like an intense fallout between two camps. On the one side, there's Sultana, the former Labour MP who quit Keir Starmer's party and then publicly launched the New Left Party in an early July shock announcement. On the other, there's Jeremy Corbyn, former leader of the Labour Party, who tried to roll back that announcement the very next day. There was then a period where they seemed to be getting along, but this morning, Sultana put out a new announcement. We said this was your party, and we meant it. We have just launched our membership. Join us and be a part of history, and then there's the website. Now, masses of people heard that call and signed up, paying £5 a month or £55 a year to be a member. And it looked like it was going very, very well. In just a few hours, the Left Party had claimed 20,000 members, according to Sultana. Though that post also contains a hint of trouble to come, with a reference to bad faith actors trying to claim the link was fake. Half an hour later, and Corbyn posted this. Urgent message to all yourparty.uk supporters. This morning, an unauthorised email was sent to all yourparty.uk supporters with details of a supposed membership portal hosted in a new domain name. Legal advice is being taken. That email should be ignored by all supporters. If any direct debits have been set up, they should be immediately cancelled. The agreed process was announced on the 1st of August. The Independent Alliance group of MPs, Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultana, Iqbal Mohammed, Adnan Hussain, and Shokat Adam and Ayub Khan, are stewarding and accountable for the foundation process for the new party, leading to an inaugural democratic conference in the autumn. Earlier this week, we shared new details about the roadmap to the launch, including our plans for mass regional assemblies and our founding conference. Soon, you'll be able to turn your support into membership at yourparty.uk and shape the future of our party and our country. Now, Corbyn makes reference to an email there, one that was sent out to the roughly 800,000 people who'd given their email addresses to the party, and that email was sent out on Monday. And it laid out a timetable. It said membership would open in September, with draft constitutional and strategy documents published for members to amend. In October, there would be regional assemblies across the country, and in November, there would be a founding conference with delegates chosen by lottery to attend in person, but with all members able to vote on the party's constitution online. It sounded, to me anyway, pretty well thought out. But in a later response to Corbyn today, Sultana told a very different story, saying this. I want to clarify the situation regarding the membership system for your party. Neither of this week's emails had the dual authorization of both myself and Jeremy, which was the agreement made at the start of this process. After being sidelined by the MPs named in today's statement and effectively frozen out of the official accounts, I took the step of launching a membership portal so that supporters could continue to engage and organise. This was in line with the roadmap set out to members on Monday and is a safe, secure, legitimate portal for the party. Everyone who supports us should sign up now. My sole motivation has been to safeguard the grassroots involvement that is essential to building this party. Unfortunately, I have been subjected to what can only be described as a sexist boys' club. I have been treated appallingly and excluded completely. They have refused to allow any other women with voting rights on the working group, blocking the gender-balanced committee that both Jeremy and I signed up to. Dalia, let's just start here. So you've got Zara Sultana saying she was just trying to get things moving and she's been sidelined. You've got Jeremy saying it was illegitimate for her to do so. Look, I interviewed Zara in July and she was in pretty good mood about the whole thing then. And she told me the Labour Party is dead. Is it actually now your party that's the one in the morgue?
I mean, it's not alive and well, is it? We can say that at least. This has, of course, now happened for a second time. This story of, people being told that something is going to happen, waiting a very long time, feeling like they're running out of steam, and then Zara announcing something, and then that later being undermined by Jeremy and his team, either by briefings to the press or through statements made and posted on his social media. This, of course, happened, first of all, when the party first was being announced. There was a sense of there had been whisperings of a new party happening. People were very desperate for a new party. The Labour Party was showing itself every day to be more and more ineffective against the threat of the far right. And Zara, overnight announces that she's resigning from the Labour Party and announces that she's starting a party with Jeremy Corbyn, which then gets briefed to the press later that Jeremy Corbyn did not agree with that. So that happened the first time. The same thing has now happened again. If it happens once, you can kind of forgive it. When it happens twice, it begins to speak to something deeply structurally wrong. Because, when it happened the first time, it's clear that still there was quite a lot of goodwill amongst people, because even though that happened, 800,000 people still signed up, at least for updates to the new party. So they were able to forgive it the first time it happened. When it happens again, it becomes a little more difficult to stomach and to signal to people that this is a coalition, an organization that can be trusted. And so I have to say, I am extremely disappointed. I'm extremely disgusted by the way that all of this goodwill and willingness amongst at least 800,000 people who signed up to be part of a coalition to fight off the far right, how that is being taken for granted and wasted at this moment. Last Saturday, I woke up to footage on my phone of 150,000 very well organized far right protesters filling the streets of London, backed by one of the richest men on the planet. And the idea that, they weren't chanting for Brexit, they weren't chanting for Nigel Farage, they were chanting for Tommy Robinson, who is about as far right as things get in this country. And so the far right is really knocking at the door of power, both state power and street power in this country. And the idea that two of the most prominent left figures in the country are allowing this opportunity to fight off that threat, to devolve into a public spat, is a historic abdication of responsibility. It is unacceptable. This is kind of the last shot we have to stop this country from taking a very, very dark turn. And I actually say that from a position of optimism. Despite all this, there is still a core of optimism that I have, because it should not be this hard to beat back the far right in this country. Why do I say that? 800,000 people signed up to support a project whose main goal is to build an anti-fascist kind of politics in this country, to be a vehicle to beat the populist far right in this country. When we look over the channel at France, the far right were also knocking on the door of state power in France. When in the European parliamentary elections, the far right party got double the amount of votes of the ruling party. It looked almost inevitable that Marine Le Pen was going to be the Prime Minister of France. And what happened? The left got together. They put all of the squabbles aside. They said, we are united by the commitment to beat the far right in this country. Here are 10 principles that we can all stand behind. And we have a longer term project that also we will commit to. But the priority is to put all differences aside and stop the far right from getting into power. And they did it. And there is no reason that we can't replicate that here. But the key reason that that was successful is one word: coalition. There is no single figure or single organization that is up to this task alone. And the only path that we have out of this impasse that we have right now is a coalition politics. It's not going to be the Greens on their own. It's not going to be Zara on her own. It's not going to be Jeremy on his own. It has to be a coalition of left political forces uniting behind this, because this is not a long-term project. This is a short-term emergency break that we need, because if Reform get into power, none of this is going to matter, because the Reform is the electoral face of the far right, and they will not allow us to do anything when it comes to fighting for our own rights. All of this will be a moot point. So we need to get our act together, and anyone who is involved in either on Zara's side, on Corbyn's side, on anyone's side, anyone who is involved in thwarting a coalition politics between Zara and Jeremy and between the Greens is not on our side.
I couldn't agree more. I want to ask you one more thing, Dalia. I want to ask you about the point that, or the kind of claim that Zara made in her statement about there being a kind of sexist boys club at the heart of this. And it is notable that when you look at Corbyn's statement about who the people are who have a kind of able to vote, Zara is the only woman there. She's also the youngest person there. Do you think that's playing a role here? I mean, it was it's such a feature of the Labour Party. We know that, women of colour are, who speak out and are on the left, come in for like the most shocking treatment. I mean, hopefully that hasn't carried over to here, right?
I mean, a leftist woman of colour is a very scary thing, apparently. We just need to look at, the targeting of Ilhan Omar, the targeting of Diane Abbott. I agree that it doesn't look good to be sidelining, the only woman that is involved in this project. I always say that kind of representation politics is not a substitute for politics, full stop. But I kind of think it's like the benchmark. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you have a movement that has only white people or only men in it, it's kind of like, well, you've not cleared the first hurdle of an inclusive politics. Now, that's not to say that the Conservative front bench is incredibly diverse. Having representativeness in terms of identity does not necessarily mean that you have representativeness in politics. But if you can't even get like a woman involved in your organization or a person of color involved in your organization, it speaks to a deeper problem. Like, to me, representation is kind of like it's kind of like the lowest hanging fruit that you kind of clear before you start doing the actual politics. So I must say it doesn't look good. But what I will say as well is, it's very difficult because Jeremy is someone who has been involved in a lot of movements. A lot of us know Jeremy from a long time before him becoming a household name. And it's not something that I know of Jeremy to be someone who wants to exclude people from politics, particularly for these kinds of reasons. But, there is the argument that perhaps he is being surrounded by people who are kind of willing to use these very ruthless measures. But I have to say, I don't know if misogyny is the motivating force, but it's probably being used somewhat opportunistically to exclude Zara for other reasons. But I will say, it doesn't look good to me.
Yeah, I just saw a comment in the chat, which I think is probably quite indicative for a lot of people, where someone said, sorry, I just moved past, so I can't get the name, but someone said it's this spat today that made them make the decision to join the Greens and pay membership fees at the Greens. And, that's fine, because the Greens, as you said, Dalia, that's kind of where this party should be looking to do some kind of coalition for the bigger project of getting us away from a reform government, and the potential influence that really people on the quite far right could have on how things go. I mean, a reform, in my opinion, is on the far right, but I'm talking about an even more extreme right. So, yeah, if you the Greens are there at least, and we'll come on to them in a minute. Now, look, those views that I just gave you are the views of the two co-leaders. But journalist Archie Woodrow, who's been writing about the formation of the new party, posted this thread today explaining what he thought had happened. And I thought this was quite interesting. So he says, Peace and Justice Project, PJP, led by Pamela Fitzpatrick and factional allies from the ex-leader of the opposition, ex-Unite, collective networks, for example, Carrie Murphy, Amy Jackson, Alan Gibbons, Sean Housel, controlled the Your Party mailing list. But MOU Limited, controlled by Andrew Feinstein, Jamie Driscoll, and Beth Winter, now Sultana allies, controlled Your Party finances and donor information. This was part of a compromise to balance power between the two factions. Sultana's team claimed that Sultana and Corbyn agreed joint sign-off on all official Your Party statements. Corbyn's team dispute this and think agreement was for majority decision of the 6 independent MPs. That's pretty much what Corbyn said in his statement. Sultana was refusing to sign off anything until agreement could be reached on a new organising committee to steward the process rather than 6 MPs having oversight. So that sounds like a kind of wanting a clearer constitutional sort of structure. Sultana's team want joint leadership, but feel Sultana and her allies are being completely excluded from the project. Then the story gets even more interesting, with Woodrow posting this. Sultana's team hear that a membership system is about to be launched, which would send membership fees to PJP, the Peace and Justice Party, and therefore give PJP complete control over the new party, data, finances, mailing list, and membership systems. Sultana's team use the main Your Party mailing list that they own to launch a membership system connected to a separate website where all data and finances are controlled by MOU, as they fear it's their last chance to avoid being completely excluded from the process. PJP, Corbyn's constituency office, Your Party, We Demand Change, and possibly other organisations with a variety of different staff and volunteers all operate out of the same office. So potentially a lot of people have been in a position to access that mailing list. It's unclear who PJP authorised to access the mailing list, whether they gave people from Sultana's team access, etc. So it's not 100% clear yet whether or not this is actually a data breach. Now, that's quite a big deal if it is a data breach. Dalia, look, this is just one person's take. And we do know how important control of party data is. We know that from the period when Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party. But if this account is true, it looks like the depth of the factionalism at the heart of the project and ownership of the project, and over the question of who gets and who doesn't get to lead it, maybe at the heart of it. Well, what do you make of it?
I mean, look, I have to refer back to France again, because France is the model that we should be following, because it's the one that worked. And I remember, Mélenchon seemed like the natural leader of that coalition. Obviously, in the end, Macron refused to appoint anyone from the left-wing coalition as prime minister. But when it looked like, because they had won the majority, that they should be able to then have a prime minister representing their broad left coalition, Mélenchon said, look, I am ready and willing to lead and to be the figurehead. But if it's not useful for me to be the figurehead, if people decide that it is not useful for me to be the figurehead, then I won't be the figurehead. And that is the kind of spirit that we need. We should not be having fights about who is leading this. And I guess for me, what my question is, there was a really long period of time where it was very clear that a new electoral vehicle was needed. It was clear that, there needed to be, and I, a lot of people say, well, the Greens were the electoral vehicle. Why don't people just join that? And I think that there's nothing wrong with having a coalition of organizations or parties that maybe speak to different parts of our broad base. That's fine. So you might say, so there was a while when it was very clear that this was needed. There was a very long time to hash out these kinds of things, to hash out, what is the decision-making process behind the comms? Who has to sign off on what in order for an email to go out? How are we going to make sure that there is a process for data sharing and data access that both means that different factions are not shut out from, the data, the access to the data, but also that it's not like everyone just has that, we're not breaching, data privacy. There was a lot of time to hash this out. And I don't understand what was happening in that year and a bit when we were all sitting around waiting for someone to announce the new left populist party vehicle. Because ultimately that process has got to be both something that ensures that no single figure sees this as their project, but rather that this is a collective project, but also is not going to be so arduous and bureaucratic that it is going to frustrate any movement at a time when things are very time sensitive. The next election is not a movable deadline. The next election is happening when it's going to happen, and we need to have our shit together by the time that happens in order to stop a worst case scenario, which unfortunately now is looking like the most likely one.
And I think something to add is from my impression from speaking to people about the new party is that what most people want is a dual leadership setup. They want to see Jeremy Corbyn and they want to see Zara Sultana co-leading the party because they feel like these are two people who can be broadly representative. And if the issue is leadership or who gets to lead it, I mean, one thing that's really striking for me from those posts from Archie Woodrow is that, on Zara's side or around her organization, there's a lot of people who've faced, electoral politics before. There's Beth Winter, there's Andrew Feinstein, and there's Jamie Driscoll, all people who, in some way understand elections because they've done it themselves and they understand constituents and so on and so forth. But when you look at sort of the people around Corbyn, that's not the case. It's not the case that, a lot of them are people who've been with him for a very long time, but it's not the case that they themselves have, as it were, faced the same kind of electoral scrutiny or have the same kind of impact on the public, which is what you need in an electoral, if you're going to win an election or if you're going to do well in an election. And, some things I've seen suggested online are things like, well, actually, for some of those people, it's very important that Corbyn has a single leadership because that is their way to consolidate power. In a co-leadership system, they would naturally drift to the sidelines. I mean, that is just a view. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, what if there wasn't a single leader? What if this wasn't about who the leader is? I'm not getting this sense of acute urgency that so many of us are feeling after what we witnessed last Saturday. Like last Saturday should have been a wake up. Last Saturday should have been a wake up call. Also, what's happening in the US should be a wake up call. Like, you don't think that the minute Nigel Farage gets into power, he is not going to work from the exact same playbook as Donald Trump. Donald Trump has tried and tested all the techniques out for him. He knows exactly what he's going to do once he gets into power. Where is the urgency? And this is not about any single figure. This is about two people who have their own base, who have their own people that they are, that they speak to, bringing their spheres of influence together to create something that is bigger than the sum of their parts. That's what this is about. And I think that is the strongest form of this movement, because, there are some people that we need to get on side who might never want to vote for a party headed by Corbyn. Corbyn is a very popular person amongst some people. He's got a lot of name recognition for good and for bad. There are some people who would never join if it was just Jeremy Corbyn. So Zara Sultana offers a kind of fresher image that is somehow a bit distanced from Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party, which some people that we need to have on side in order to beat back the far right are going to identify as that. Similarly, there's also a huge number of people who won't go along with a political project unless it's headed by Jeremy Corbyn. And so for those people, so if you have both of these figures, then you can bring together both of those groups, both of those communities. And that is something that you cannot capture with either one of them alone. And then you bring in Zach Polanski and you bring in people who would consider themselves to be potential Green voters who don't want to be associated with anyone who's been involved in the Labour Party, but would consider to be involved in something that is associated with the Green Party. Then you have three big groups of people who can come together under an umbrella that they otherwise might not have worked together in any other context. So that is the strongest iteration of this movement. But what we have now is neither the benefit of a single person movement, because, we do have the Green Party. And even if, Zara or Corbyn manage to edge the other one out for power here, you still have these two parties that can be a source of kind of, some people might argue might split the potential base. But now you have neither the benefit of a single focused leader or the benefit of a coalition politics. You have the worst of both worlds. And to me, the coalition politics is the healthiest and most likely to be successful route for us to be able to do what they did in France, which is demonstrate that the rise of the far right is not inevitable. It's not an inevitability that it is being painted out to be.
Just to go back for the last time to the internal wranglings here. I mean, there's a comment here I want to read out because I think it's probably representative of a lot of people who signed up for your party, which is that there is a lot of love for both Corbyn and Sultana, but it's not limitless. So Veggie Nugnug says with a £5 super chat, we are desperate. We need a party to keep the far right out. I'd still forgive these children if they got their shit together and made up. Yeah, I think a lot of people probably agree. Look, before we go on, I just want to make something clear. Obviously, it would have been so much better if Corbyn or Sultana or someone from one of their teams had been here to talk about this with me, rather than me and Dalia talk about it, although, of course, Dalia does like an amazing job, as always. And we're only able to go by the statements made by both Corbyn and Sultana, as well as various bits of information we've gleaned over the past month to make sense of what's happened today. But that's not our fault. I asked both Corbyn and Sultana to appear on the show tonight, as well as close figures on both sides, and we were refused by all. And personally, I think it's pretty grim that no one was holding themselves accountable to a lot of people who've put tons of faith into the project. Like, as Dalia said, so many people wanted to work. Not only wanted to, they needed to. And it's those 800,000 that, to me anyway, don't really seem to be mattering here very much. Well, let's move on to the beneficiaries of today's chaos, or one of them anyway, although I'm sure he wouldn't frame it like that. In the middle of all the public airing of laundry, Green Party leader Zach Polansky posted this. Delighted to announce we've just reached 73,000 new members. The Green Party is the party of environmental, social, racial, and economic justice. Dalia, good day for Zach Polansky. I mean, probably a bad day for all of us, to be honest. But, there's something there that he's saying about himself that the new party can't say about themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, I honestly think that from what I know of Zach Polansky, which is not much more than anyone else watching will know, he has expressed a willingness and a desire to work in coalition with anyone who is willing to beat the far right. And he seems to be having a more mature approach to this entire question. And I'm sure that he's not very happy, actually, to see what is going down. He wants there to be a strong coalition of people, of organizations, whether it's from the Green movement, the Labour movement, people who see themselves as part of both. Even, I would argue, some of the Liberals, they need to be on side too in order for us to be able to meet this challenge of a potential reform victory. And it's look, I've never been a Green Party member, but Zach Polansky seems to be the only person who is meeting the challenge with the seriousness that it needs to be met with. And I mean, what I would say as well is when we think about just how kind of quickly things are moving in this country, I'm talking a lot about reform, what's going to happen when reform get into power, what's it going to look like. It's important to mention that this is not actually just future speculation. Reform have obviously done very well in the local election, in the council elections that just happened. And they have been using that power in a way that tells us exactly what they intend to do when they have national political power. They've been doing things like cancelling local council budgets that are meant to be for pride celebrations, for celebrating the queer community, the LGBT community. And they've just been cancelling those kind of budgets. They've shown us what they are planning to do. They are going to go down this route of making this a hostile country for queer people, for Black people, for brown people, for immigrants, and also for the working class. Because let's not forget, Reform don't have any substantive material package for the working class. They want to do things like introduce insurance-based healthcare. They want to scrap the renters bill. They want to scrap the employers' right bill. rights bill. They want to do things to remove to give tax breaks to private schools. So their material offer is also shit for the working class, as well as for marginalized groups of people. And so we are very much on that march already. And I just really, really hope, if they are able to get this together, we will support whatever vehicle is needed and is in front of us to stop the rise of reform. But I just really hope that they are able to both work with one another and also to work with Zach Polanski, because what Zach Polanski has built is clearly quite serious. He was an insurgent Green leader candidate, and he organized and managed to win the leadership. And that is the kind of focus and organization that we need to apply to the rest of the country in order to beat this thing.
In the West, Gen Z are usually associated with a kind of stony realism about their position as workers under capitalism, rejecting an economics that seems to many of them a trap. In South Asia, however, they're quickly becoming a generation of revolutionaries, having overthrown autocratic leaders in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and sparking wide-scale protests in Indonesia. But last week in Nepal, Gen Z brought down an entire government, a democratically elected government, before electing a new interim prime minister via Discord server. Previously, the Chief Justice of Nepal, Sushila Karki, was sworn in as interim prime minister of the Himalayan state last Friday, the first woman to lead the Nepalese government and the first elected leader in the world to be installed via an online vote. So what lit this revolutionary match? Nepal has long been in the grip of three parties, with 14 coalition governments in the last 15 years, essentially rotating power between the leaders of each party, three men who just become prime minister one after the other. Corruption was rife and nepotism everywhere. But recently, there emerged a youth movement calling itself Gen Z and organizing online, often using the hashtag NepoBaby and NepoKids, and sharing images of the children of high-ranking officials living lives of, to them, unimaginable luxury. Like this one of Saugat Thapa, the son of Nepali politician Bindu Kumar Thapa, who posed with a Christmas tree made out of luxury brand packages. In Nepal, the median age is 25, so this was no small movement, a youth movement, but a very big one. And when the government announced a near-total social media ban at the beginning of this month, clamping down on the use of Facebook, video apps, and WhatsApp, memes turned into action. On September 8th, there was a large but peaceful protest outside Parliament led by the Gen Z movement. Thousands of students and young people turned out, including hundreds of schoolchildren in their uniforms. But it's also been suggested that the Gen Z protest was then infiltrated by older and more radical elements who attempted to storm Parliament. An order was given for parliamentary guards to fire on the crowd, with 20 protesters killed, 20 young protesters killed. The next day, there was an outpouring of anger as a result of the massacre of the country's youth. Government buildings in Kathmandu were set alight, while the residences of the Prime Minister, government ministers, and the party leaders were torched. The arson and violence spread to other symbols of the wealthy elite, Kathmandu's Hilton Hotel, media companies, and some retail chains. At least 70 people were killed, but days later, Nepal's parliament was dissolved, while former leaders of the country fled into hiding, some of them abroad. And this week, the new Prime Minister has begun the task of creating an interim government, with elections scheduled for March. But there will be challenges, big challenges, with much of the country's government infrastructure and records destroyed. At her own oath-taking on Saturday, new Prime Minister Sushila Karki said this: "All the institutions responsible for running the country and documents were destroyed. We are in a zero state." Earlier today, I was joined by Dr. Chandani Thapa and rapper OMG Spark, just two of the many thousands of young Nepali demonstrators who took part in the protests that brought down the government. I started by asking them what Nepal is like now in the wake of those protests.
I think it's more peaceful right now. From the last week from the protest, that everything was like vandalized and like there was no traffic, there was so much pollution, people all around, like the road was like really not that clean, but it's settled now. It's like really peaceful right now. So yeah.
Like September 8th and 9th was pretty traumatizing, to be honest. A lot of terror, a lot of vandalization, basically a social fallout, 2 days, even third and the fourth day, I'd say. But then it is quite surprising to see people are, already going back to their lives. Roads are back to normal. I mean, there are some peaceful candle programs and, like a tribute program that's going around the city, but then it is back to normal, to be honest. Everything is the way it is, to be honest. And it amuses me.
Chandani, could you give us like some of the background to the protests on the 8th or the 9th? Like the way the media has framed it here a lot is in terms of it was a social media ban that drove this. Is that right? Is that what it was, or was that just the trigger?
I would not say it was just about the social media ban. It was just a trigger point. Yeah, definitely. It was just a trigger point. So,
Spark, earlier you mentioned the 8th and the 9th. So tell me what happened on the 8th. I understand that there was a peaceful demonstration. What happened then?
Well, just to add to the previous question, I think, like the system, the government, or the entire political system that we have in Nepal was like house of cards, and I think it was a matter of time something like this happened, to be honest, because everything could go south easily because the system was not working at all. And Nepalese people in general, not just the youth, they're pretty fed up with the entire system. So what happened on 8th was basically, it started as a trend in social medias, right? TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. It was like a call out for all the youth to kind of protest peacefully in this designated area. So what started out as a very peaceful protest turned very violent, very scary, to be honest, in matters of hours. And it was quite surprising because I'm sure like both of us were there in the protest. It felt we were listening to peaceful songs. We were listening to Bob Marley. We were playing all those songs. It was like very nice vibes because I think the new generation is also aware that being violent is not the way because most of the youth are educated, right? So I think after the crowd was agitated on the end of the police forces and other security people started agitating the crowd, and one thing led to another, things got real bad, and that's it, man. About 8th.
Yeah, I'd read in some reports that there were perhaps older infiltrators in the crowd who sort of began the violence or attempted to storm Parliament. Does that theory sound correct to you, or is that not what you saw, Chandani?
it was not Genji, I can tell you that. It was really hijacked at a point by the old political leaders and their like people, and they started vandalizing all the government properties because maybe there were so many cases like where the Supreme Court, there were so many cases about the criminal corruptions and about the political leaders, right? Member of the political leaders. So yeah, they literally hijacked the protest, peaceful protest, and like it just happened.
So is sort of what? So the Supreme Court was, I think, burned on the 9th. Is that right? So you suggesting
not
that
just the Supreme Court, hold the parliament, and like we had this Singha Darbar from a like very long time where everything was stored. Yeah, everything was burned down. So
just going back to the 8th, so at some point the parliamentary guards fired on the crowd and 20 people were killed. Who was responsible? Did you know who gave the order for that to happen? Is that clear yet?
Well, obviously there's like an investigation unit that the interim government has kind of formed it right now, but then we haven't got to the root of who actually gave the command. But then it is obviously people at the police company, also the home minister. So these people were obviously kind of like, it was their authority to, kind of like construct how these securities are handled that day. So I think there has been some negligence towards the police system itself, and the security forces were there to kind of like stop something like this from happening. So obviously there is a massive flaw in the security chain of command itself, 100%.
So then the next day is the 9th, and that's when sort of arson attacks and destruction of property kind of spreads out much wider, I guess, in the wake of that massacre. Tell me what that day was like for you.
I was called to a hospital. I was like off duty, and I was called to the hospital because there were not like enough doctors to cover all the injured people. So I was in an emergency all day working from 9 a.m. to maybe 12 a.m. So I was not in the road, but I was in the hospital that day. So I can tell you the hospital was at around 2 p.m. Hospital was out of the water, out of the resources, out of the and the police was also trying to stop and throw the tear gases inside the hospital where injured were getting treatment. So that was really bad experience for myself too. So
And what kind of injuries were you seeing?
Some were bringing because of the gunshots, some were faint because of the tear gases, and some was injured because of the fire. Yeah, so many things was going on.
And Spark, what about you? What was the 9th like for you?
Well, I think before, when the crowd started getting agitated on this 8th itself, I think, in Nepal, there's a massive political polarization, so to speak, at the moment. There are so many interest groups, including Gen Z itself. So I think a lot of people started participating in the 8th itself. So it was not clear who it was. It was just people who were agitated, who had enough, and some resorted in violence. Some people resorted in vandalism. And after the night of 8th, when we received that there had been deaths, 16-year-old, 17-year-old children's in school uniforms being shot in their heads, that is completely against the security protocol itself. That kind of, really, really agitated people to its end. So 9th was complete a social fallout because people were super angry because innocent people are dying like that. And I think what happened on 9th was completely a reflection of what kind of system that we had in place at the first place. Because if we had a good system, this could be something, it could have been avoided, right? So many people lost their lives. So September 9th, I mean, all the political leaders, all the people, officers that are involved in the security of the protest itself, there was a big question that they didn't actually do nothing at all. They just instigated people, right? So 9th was completely unexpected. I mean, I went out to see parliaments, see executive bodies and offices. It was pure terror, to be honest, because there was no form of government. The government has completely collapsed. The prime minister had resigned that day. Things were out of control for I'm sure around for 24 hours, Nepal was under no form of government. It was complete chaos. So it raised a question because everything around was turning really savage, to be honest. People civilians were shooting guns in the air. People who don't know even how to operate a gun, stuff like that. People were putting buildings on fire. And there was a security concern because in the news, we also heard that prisoners from, prisons, they had made their escapes and they're out in our society. So September 9th was more of a terror because it imposed major security concerns for people who are living in Kathmandu and obviously other parts of Nepal as well.
I mean, you painted a very, very vivid picture there of complete, almost like societal collapse on the 9th. But, just a few days later, and there's a new interim prime minister elected, as you say, as you told me at the beginning of this interview, things are pretty calm in Kathmandu. How is it that happened so quickly?
People literally went on a Discord and we choose the new government. It was, I know it's but but we didn't have the choice. We needed to move quickly because the position was vacuum and it was really a bad threat, I would say. The political leaders were the people of the political leaders were everywhere. They were destroying the properties, they were vandalizing everything. So at that point we needed someone to stabilize the the environment. So yeah, we literally went on a Discord, did this 3-hour whole discussion, and we literally chose our chief justice. She was also the chief justice of Nepal before, so first lady. So yeah, we literally chose her in a Discord.
I know. I think she's like I think she's the first political leader in history to be elected online.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
go on, Spark.
just to on the contrary, I personally think it was not just based on Discord itself, because that idea itself seems very bleak, to be honest. Well, there was a lot of thought process, there was a lot of negotiation that happened. Also, the whole narrative around the world narrative that, like Nepal interim prime minister got elected from a Discord itself is kind of like a joke at this moment. So I think there's some truth to it, because there are groups with 9,000, 10,000 Generation Z people on Discords, like voicing for good of the nation itself. But then what actually led to a complete disaster within such short period of time, I think is because, Nepal has underwent two democratic revolutions in its history, right? In the late 90s and in 2006-7 period of time. It is completely evident that the democracy we brought through those revolutions kind of was in question, because it was not working and everything fell apart just in 2 days. So I think, being a society which is predominantly agrarian, most of the Nepalese people are farmers and, people who are working in villages. So, and transitioning from that to, like the modern world where everything is being spearheaded with capitalism and everything, it was kind of like a difficult race for the whole society itself. And while we were there watching politicians and people were enjoying nepotism, so to speak, that kind of created a lens for us that, like these people are having the time of their life, while all the Nepalese people who are the working class are suffering. So I think that hit a limit, and to the point where it didn't even take 28 hours for the government to collapse. So I think it is also because of our political history, to be honest, rather than just the ban or just the corruption, So it's like an injustice form of government that Nepal has always been under.
That's super interesting because, one of the ways that this is being framed in the West is that this was a Gen Z revolution. But it sounds to me, Spark, like that what you're saying is this is a class-based revolution.
It is 100%. We have to learn what happened in the history. We are a very feudal, like a very feudal society. There were kings for so many years. There was 104 years of Rana regime where people were, they were not given education. Commoners were not able to participate in education, which is one of the very important institutions of the society. So I think the whole catching up part for a very large portion of society to this time of contemporary world is something that was really challenging and very exhausting for Nepali people, even my dad, my grandfather, so on and on. So I think it's about how we've always been governed by feudal societies and, well, I don't know, like neo-fascist government, like trying to always exploit the citizens, through corruption, through all these, all the systematic corruption that they've done so many years, ripped out of citizens. So I think that's the most serious part. The Gen Zs or the youth are just a spark for the movement, So I don't think the Gen Z, like flipped the whole government, flipped everything. So I think it's the prolonged oppression, and prolonged history of corruption and so on. It is not the social media ban itself. So it's a very historical thing that has led us to this day.
That was Dr. Chandani Thapa and rapper OMG Spark joining me earlier today. Now, it wasn't just young Nepali protesters who went viral during the country's youth protests. There was a young Brit there too. Travel vlogger Harry, whose account across social media is called We Hate the Cold, was traveling by moped from Thailand to the UK. He arrived in Nepal just as the protests were beginning and found himself right in the middle of the story. And he documented all of it. This is from one of his videos.
country?
From UK.
UK?
Yeah.
Oh.
What just happened in there? Explosions?
That's burning.
Burning?
Yeah.
Gas?
Parliament burning. Yeah.
Parliament burning?
Yeah.
Parliament is burning?
Yeah.
Parliament is burning.
Parliament burning from we people.
Yeah. Okay, man.
Okay.
Nice to meet you. Safe.
Thanks.
Please be safe.
Okay.
So, you heard it. Parliament is burning. Parliament has burned.
That video's been viewed nearly 30 million times. We Hate the Cold's Harry also joined me earlier today from Kathmandu, and I began asking him what had brought him to Nepal in the first place.
It was on a motorbike trip from Thailand to England, and I had to use an alternative route because the Pakistan border had closed. And to cut a long story short, my embassy didn't want me to go through the Pakistan border, wouldn't write me a letter. Ministry of Home Affairs said yes. So I had to circumvent my way around and go to Kathmandu. And I arrived on the day that 20 people were shot.
That was at the initial stages where I guess there was a kind of peaceful protest outside Parliament, and then there was a kind of attempt by some in the protesters apparently to storm Parliament, and then 20 people were killed. Now, like from the footage that you've put up on YouTube, which is amazing, you're really like in the thick of the action. How much did you understand of the politics that was going on while you were there?
In all honesty, I knew a very small amount from when I arrived that day prior. I knew it was something to do with corruption, and basically the social media was the last straw. A lot of the Nepalis were very upset that the media was portraying that it was just about social media. My understanding that it was the last straw. But when I arrived, it was I was kind of picking up things as I went along. I was just asking people, what's going on? What's this about? What's that about? And I think you can see that from the video. It's just a very on the fly. Wow, I've ended up here. Let's see what's going on.
One of the things that you're honestly really amazing journalism does, and I think like people will be watching these videos for a long time, is it gives a really powerful sense of the scale of these protests. How were you received as basically someone traveling through who started documenting them? How were you received by the protesters? Were you welcomed? Was there hostility? What was the vibe?
People were very welcoming, as Nepali people are. They were just incredibly welcoming towards me. And I found that a bit strange because I thought, it's probably one of the very few countries where that is a possibility for a protest. And they were very open to wanting me to film everything. And they were, they just wanted me to come with them and see what was going on. They were very protective as well. Like, don't go there, it's dangerous. And I said, I want to look. And they said, okay, come with me. So, very interesting protest experience.
So tell me a bit more about the protest experience. I mean, there are scenes of you obviously running away from explosions and, movements by what looks like the military in the background. What was it like?
Why, it's a very difficult thing to explain. It's complete chaos, but within that chaos, there was also a lot of humanity. It's this weird kind of cocktail of emotions that everyone's kind of feeling, but because of the adrenaline, you don't process it. You're just witnessing what's happening in that moment, at that moment. You're very present with it. The way I would explain it to someone who has never, ever experienced this is if you've ever done, this is much lower scale, but if you've ever done a fighting sport and you've done Muay Thai or you've done boxing or something like that, it's kind of a bit like the first few hits, they scare you. It's you kind of want to get out of it. You want to run away. But after that, you're just in.
And how have your videos gone down in Nepal?
I walk down the street and I get stopped everywhere. I cannot walk around without having someone take a selfie or, tell me that what I did was amazing. Thank you for showing what actually happened on the ground. And I may have done it accidentally, but it's really nice to receive that praise from people.
So obviously your videos have really blown up. They've done really, really well. And it's no wonder because they are actually amazing to watch. What are your plans next? You're going to hang around in Nepal and see a whole new country be born, or are you going to move on?
Yeah, so today actually answered that question for me. I went to immigration and I was a little bit kind of hesitant whether they would let me extend my visa or anything like that. But I went in, everybody was very excited to see me. I took pictures with people, I extended my visa. And yeah, so I'm here for another 14 days. I do have some plans. This new level of like weird internet fame that I've somehow managed to get has opened a lot of doors for me, and there's a lot of opportunities for me here now. And there's one piece of content I wanted to film before I came 4 months ago. And I think now I have the ability and the contacts to be able to do that, and I think it would be really cool.
It is strange to be, I guess, in a foreign country, and then overnight be a kind of celebrity in a country where but it's not your home. I mean, what is that like? Like that sort of transformation that happens overnight.
It's really amazing. Like everybody's very friendly and welcoming and helpful, and really like loving the stuff I did. But at the same time, it's kind of overwhelming as well, because all this stuff has come into my emails because everybody wants to work with me and things. So I'm trying to get things done, but then I'm getting stopped every moment in the street. And I'm a friendly person. I don't want to, say no to anybody, or, because these are the very people that made me what I am now. And they have been so friendly to me. I want to be friendly back, But yeah, it's a really strange feeling. I don't really know how to quite describe it. It feels very surreal. Almost all of my dreams of doing YouTube have come true just like overnight.
That was Harry of We Hate the Cold. And yeah, I do recommend going to see some of the quite incredible footage that he got during those protests. Also, we'll be putting out a longer version of that first interview tomorrow morning if you're interested in finding out what people are thinking about the future of Nepal now that there's a new interim prime minister and a new government on the way. On Monday night, US talk show host Jimmy Kimmel went on air and did what almost everybody else in the media was doing, discussing the assassination of Charlie Kirk, allegedly by 22-year-old Utah resident Tyler Robinson. Here's what Kimmel said.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Now, look, there are maybe reasons to criticize Kimmel there. After all, he's trying to make an assessment of Tyler Robinson's political alliances based on the slimmest of evidence, which is exactly what he's accusing the administration of doing. The administration is obviously weaponizing things in various ways. And of course, what Kimmel wants to say is that Robinson's family background points to someone from within Charlie Kirk's own camp. As I said, what he's doing is not really that different from what US President Donald Trump and many of his proxies did immediately after Kirk's killing. This was Trump on Monday.
It looks like he became radicalized over the internet. And it seems like he has wonderful parents, brought in a wonderful neighborhood, smart guy, great boards, great marks, great student. And then something happened to him over a fairly short period of time. It looks like he was radicalized over the internet, and it's radicalized on the left. He's a left. I have a lot of problems with the left, and they get protected, and they shouldn't be protected.
I mean, the actual facts are that the evidence of a clear political allegiance on either side is pretty slim. So you've got those like Kimmel, who might point to Robinson's MAGA family background and his documented use of guns, and others have linked him to the extreme far-right figure Nick Fuentes based on the memes he's alleged to have etched on the bullet casings used in Robinson's killing. And the evidence on the side of Trump is that Robinson appears to have been in a romantic relationship with someone who was trans, his roommate, while his mother described him as having become, quote, more pro-gay and trans rights oriented. Dalia, I just wanted to bring you in here quickly because we'll get onto the consequences, the crazy consequences for Jimmy Kimmel of what he said on the show, which didn't seem any different from what many people have been saying, and it's very scary, those consequences. But I just wanted to ask you about this race to categorize Tyler Robinson as being, part of the right or part of the left. It all seems to be really based on quite tenuous, things or beliefs he might have held. So, for example, the idea that he might have been on the left because he had taken up an interest in LGBT rights. I mean, you know, there are plenty of like Republicans or people on the right who've got gay kids who also might want rights for their kids, but who also, you know, are anti-abortion and pro-gun and whatever. Just like there may be plenty of people on the right who have, on the left rather, who have left-wing views in some respects and right-wing views in other respects. I guess what I'm asking about is, you know, I sometimes wonder that I'm like a bit politics brained. So I'm like very keen to like categorize people into these, you know, maybe 3 categories, you know, sort of the left, the right, the center. But the fact is that, you know, most Americans describe themselves as moderates and will swing from one party to another in many elections. It's also the case that, you know, individuals don't care about his politics as much as we do. Probably, you know, it may well be that there are more Americans who care about, you know, the next Marvel franchise than there are who care about the nitty-gritty of like political party life or political activism. Do you think we miss something like about the kind of fine detail and sort of contradictions of actual human beings in the world who may actually just have a lot of overlapping views when we try to categorize people in these ways?
Yeah, I mean, those of us who do politics for work think a lot a lot about, you know, building a cohesive political identity or set of political beliefs, and we think about how our beliefs relate to one another and what is the broader theoretical framework that holds all of these different opinions together. But for the vast majority of people, understandably, because, you know, politics is not their day job, their politics is not necessarily legible as a spectrum of left to right in the way that it might be for you and me, but is actually more like a kind of scribble or a knot, as it were. For most of us, you know, I mean, our parents or our siblings oftentimes will find that we'll really agree with them on some things and then really disagree with them on other things. And to us, the connection, you know, to us, that doesn't look like a cohesive politics, but to them, for whatever reason, it does feel like one. And most people do not experience politics in the way that those of us who do politics for a living do experience it. I mean, last week, I think it was me and Helena who were working on the show. Helena was hosting and I was co-hosting. And, you know, I made a point to say that it's very important that, particularly given the kind of shock and heightened sense of vigilance that many people were experiencing, the heightened sense of emotions that many people were experiencing, that it was really important that we don't try to project onto this situation our own ideas of what this might be, because it wasn't clear. And I condemned people in power, particularly from the right, who immediately jumped on the shock that people were feeling to basically use this as a reason to just crush all left speech or all speech that is not a specific kind of right-wing speech. And we see that with, you know, Donald Trump saying there, you know, the left has a lot of problems, which, given what's happened this morning, I don't even necessarily disagree. But him saying, you know, the left has a lot of problems, and he says, and they are protected and they should not be protected. Now, what does he mean by that? Does he mean that people with left-wing ideas shouldn't be protected by the First Amendment? Is that it? They shouldn't be protected by the freedom of political association, the freedom of political speech? Judging from his actions, that is what it seems. But now that we do know a little bit more, it's funny because I thought by this point I would have a bit of a clearer sense of what might have motivated this person to allegedly carry out the act that he carried out. But actually, the more that we know, it feels like the less it seems like this was an overtly political act. I mean, Ken Klippenstein wrote an article. He was in the Discord server that this individual was very active in, and he kind of tried to uncover what might be the thing that motivated Robinson to allegedly carry out this attack. And I left that being none the wiser. It seemed that all that Ken Klippenstein got from there was a sense that, you know, he was very much immersed in a kind of nihilistic, deep meme subculture. Now, did that have anything to do with it? I don't know, but you cannot say that because he has become what more pro-gay, whatever that means, i.e. maybe less homophobic, or that he has a trans partner, that necessarily means that there is a cohesive set of political ideas that go along with that. What we do know, and we still don't know, because I think if this person wanted there to be a very clear message from what he did, he would have left a manifesto, he would have left a note. We haven't seen that yet. Maybe there is one, but we can't say for sure as the public that has been found. What we do know, however, is that this was not someone who was part of an organized left organization. He was not part of an organized left movement. And so the fact that they are still trying to pin this on a broader left politics shows that they are much less concerned with finding out actually what led this individual to take this violent act, and more concerned with using this as an opportunity to crack down on particular kinds of speech that they don't agree with. And by they, it's pretty obvious who I mean.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out as well that, many more people, individuals, not states and things, but individuals, many more individuals kill for love or kind of warped conception of love than they do for politics. And obviously in Robinson's messages to his partner, he talked about how Kirk's hate had to stop. Maybe there was some impact on his partner of that for him was intolerable. I don't know. That's a speculative. But yeah, as I say, people have personal motives for all kinds of things all the time, and their views are kind of independent of it. Now, in response to Kimmel's comments on his ABC show, the comic has been suspended. Brendan Carr, a Trump appointee, is head of the Federal Communications Commission. That's the government's broadcast regulator. After Kimmel's comments, he issued a warning on right-wing political commentator Benny Johnson's podcast.
There's actions that we can take on licensed broadcasters. And frankly, I think that it's really sort of past time that a lot of these licensed broadcasters themselves push back on Comcast and Disney and say, listen, we are going to preempt. We are not going to run Kimmel anymore until you straighten this out, because we licensed broadcaster, are running the possibility of fines or license revocation from the FCC if we continue to run content that ends up being a pattern of news distortion.
So that's a pretty clear threat from the head of the regulator that they'll leverage the licenses that they give to operators. So those were the people who do who have the equipment to enable the broadcasts. If they don't moderate what they show in accordance with the administration's wishes. Now, Nexstar, which operates the Disney-owned ABC network that broadcasts the Kimmel show, then threatened to stop airing that show, leading ABC to say they were pulling it indefinitely. And Donald Trump seemed pretty pleased about it, posting this on Truth Social. Great news for America. The ratings challenge Jimmy Kimmel show is cancelled. Congratulations to ABC for finally having the courage to do what had to be done. Kimmel has zero talent and worse ratings than even Colbert, if that's possible. That leaves Jimmy and Seth, two total losers, on fake news NBC. Their ratings are also horrible. Do it, NBC. President DJT. Pretty much actively calling for further shows to be cancelled on his whim. Trump also addressed the cancellation at a press conference in the UK today.
Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
Dalia, I mean, I'm sure it won't be lost on you that one of the ways in which right-wing governments, previous governments in Poland, current government in Hungary, managed to take control of society, politics for quite a long time, and ongoing, as I say, in Hungary, was by controlling the media. What does this look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, why should a president of the United States care about the ratings of a TV show comedian? And it's clear that his ratings were fine enough for ABC to continue airing his show until he said something that pissed off a particular political faction. The part of this story that is not being talked about as much is the fact that one of the biggest broadcasting affiliates of ABC is this organization called Sinclair Broadcasting Group. And Sinclair Broadcasting Group have released a statement today saying that Jimmy Kimmel has to apologize for his comments, which weren't actually, from what I understood, derogatory about anyone in particular. It was about, he was saying, that he doesn't think that this was a leftist political actor. That's not, it's not a particularly insane thing to say. But Sinclair Broadcasting Group is kind of a little bit like a Fox News. It's a conservative organization, a conservative company that runs local news and local programming in the US. And it's, spent a lot of time kind of quite strategically buying up local news channels. It's also very Donald Trump affiliated. Now, we have to ask the question, what does it mean when you have corporate power, state power, and media power all aligning in order to restrict what can be said on television? It's very difficult to see that as anything other than a form of authoritarianism. If this was happening in any other country that's not in Europe or North America, it would be labeled authoritarian. And it just goes to show that something that many of us have always been saying, which is that the particular version of free speech wars that the far right and the right have been peddling has got absolutely nothing to do with the concept of free speech, which is the ability to be protected from state persecution for expressing political views or expressing particular kinds of speech. That is not something that the right are interested in. That is actually a leftist liberal principle. It was never anything to do with free speech. The whole free speech Trojan horse was in fact about saying that we need to be able to freely and not just freely, but we have to be able to push particular ideas on the public that they don't organically find compelling, but because we cannot win people over to these views on the basis of their own merit or their own conviction, we have to appeal to a broader kind of abstract principle as an excuse for having particular viewpoints pushed. That has always been what the free speech idea is about. It's about mainstreaming and forcibly mainstreaming ideas and opinions that actually are on the quite fringe right. And it has been a concerted effort by media as well as corporate power in order to normalize and mainstream particular kinds of speech that otherwise beforehand has been considered to be unpopular or not particularly tasteful or not something that most people want to associate themselves with. Now, obviously, Jimmy Kimmel is making the headline news at the moment because he probably is not seen to be a particular political agitator. And so the idea that he would be cut out of the media, cut off from his own show because he said something that was not pleasing to the president feels very controversial. But I also think it's important to bring up that today a judge in the US ordered that Mahmoud Khalil, who was the Columbia student who was detained in ICE for no reason other than the fact that he was a very effective negotiator with Columbia University on behalf of the student body who was protesting a genocide. He was thrown into ICE detention, and now a judge has ordered for him to be deported to Syria or Algeria, two countries with whom Mahmoud Khalil has absolutely no relationship to. And of course, the judge has said that this is because of, discrepancies or errors with his asylum application. But we know that there is no coincidence that the state has thrown all of its might behind destroying Mahmoud Khalil, splitting him away from his family, his wife, his newborn child. The only reason they have done that is because he was an effective and steadfast advocate for the Palestinian people. So yes, Jimmy Kimmel losing his show is a sign that, this alliance of corporate power, media power, and state power is beginning to coalesce into something very scary. But we are already far beyond that when it comes to particularly people who are more marginalized than someone like Jimmy Kimmel, who are not just facing losing their show, but are facing being detained and potentially deported. And that is a violation of free speech, because that is the state persecuting you on the basis of you articulating speech that you are entitled to articulate.
Dalia, thank you very much. Let's leave it there. It's been a longer than usual show. We had a very big and, for many, slightly depressing story at the top. But now I need a drink. Dalia, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.